Good morning. Did that touch you? Every time I see that video, it just strikes something in me. This video was played a couple years ago, and it started this whole anti-bullying campaign. And it kind of exposed bullying for what it is. Horrible, terrible. It brings pain. I think some of us can relate to this. Maybe. As we've been doing life groups are these opportunities where you get to kind of just be open with people. And my life group knows well my story, and I'm going to share it with you a little bit. Ever since I was young, from elementary school on through high school, I was picked on often. I was bullied. And there are parts of me that still, to this day, when I look in the mirror, I struggle a little bit. I struggle to see what my wife and my kids see. And those people and those abusive words, they stick with you, don't they? I had an experience when I was younger. I was on the bus, and the bus for people who are bullied is just a terrifying thing. And so I got on the bus, and the bus, at the very end of the route was my house. And so all the cool kids sat where? In the back where the bumps were. And the losers sat in the front. And the ones that didn't have time to get safely to the front were right there in the middle, where spitwads and everything else found you. So that's where I would sit, right in the middle, spitwads hitting my head, getting smacked over the head, bullied every day. I hated the bus. My parents didn't understand. I tried telling them over and over, can you just drive me to school? And what a relief when every once in a while they would take me to school. And I didn't have to go through that experience with this bully named Jason. One day I had my Tigers hat on. My dad bought it for me. It was a gift. And we didn't have any money to go to Tigers games, so I followed them in the newspaper. And I had this hat. And I loved the Tigers. Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, Cecil Fielder, all of those were my heroes. And so I wore my hat, and I was proud of my hat. And one day on the bus, Jason came up, and instead of hitting me, calling me certain words, he grabbed my hat, and he sat in the back, and in his oversized bully head, he stuck it on his head. I was so mad. I got up trying to take it back. The bus driver, of course, said, "Tony, sit down, quit making a ruckus." I sat there fuming, and I started to cry. I was so mad. Finally, the bus stops at my stop. I try to get my hat back. I can't. I get off the bus devastated. And I decided right there and then I'm going to get my hat back. And so I walked a quarter of a mile to where my bully's house was, Jason. I even know his last name, if you can believe it. That stuff sticks with you, doesn't it? I went to his house, and I knocked on his door. I heard yelling in the background. I thought, perfect, I'm walking into more torment. I need my hat. This woman walks out, big cigarette hanging from her lips. She's a bit overweight. She looks at me, and she says, "What do you want? What do you want, kid?" Can I talk to Jason? "Yeah, he's inside getting beat by his old man." "Stupid kid." "Okay." She turns and walks in. I open the door and walk into this demon's house, right? And there what I see when I walk in is Jason on the floor and his dad standing over him, hitting him repeatedly, calling him stupid, yelling at him for the report card that came in the mail. I saw my bully getting beat, and it didn't give me a sense of happiness, I'll tell you that. I was scared. And I watched until finally he'd had enough and sat exhausted in his lazy boy. And I saw this bully Jason walk into his bedroom, head down, weeping. I didn't know what to do. I followed him. And then when I got to his bedroom, he looked up, already his face beginning to get swollen, tears streaming down his eyes, he looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry about your hat." And he threw it back at me. I took my hat and I looked at my bully. Because for the first time in my life, I looked at him and my bully had been exposed that day. He was not the scary demon I had made him out to be. He was a hurting, broken, abused kid. And I said, "I'm sorry." And I turned and left. And Jason never picked on me again. I was not afraid of Jason anymore. In fact, I replaced my fear with compassion. And Jason, I think, could sense it when I saw him. Yeah, I had other bullies. But Jason and I shared an experience where I had and felt compassion on him. The book of Daniel is all about Daniel exposing the beastly empires, the bullies, for what they are. He exposes them for what they are so that we might not want to go that direction anymore. How many of you have appreciated this Daniel study? This is our last one today. Are you sad? I know. It's our last one. Daniel, he taught us two things. Number one, in Jeremiah 29, 5 through 6, if we can get that up on the screen. He told us, build houses, settle down, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. He said, you're going to be here a while. 70 years, it means completion. You're going to be in exile for that long. Don't just sit there waiting. Experience life to its fullest. We could learn from this, couldn't we? Some of us, we've been waiting so long for Jesus, and we haven't been living. Daniel teaches us something there. The next thing we learn is this from Psalm 4:3. It tells us we are set apart, his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call him. How many of you agree we are set apart? Amen. We're a little bit different. And I'm not just talking about weird bumper sticker Christians or odd Adventists that eat haystacks and whatever. I'm talking about something bigger. We're set apart. God gave us a template. He said, this is what I look like. Love God and love your neighbor. It's a different way to live. And this is what Daniel teaches us. And when he taught us this is what happened. The evil of the empires was exposed. We understood that wanting to live like that, greedy, militant, violent, hateful, it didn't bring us life, did it? What did it bring us? Death. We also understand this, that in their persecution, Israel, they learned that they don't have to fear death. In Daniel chapter 12, we see that Daniel, he's in his last days, and then he will die. But guess what? There's a resurrection, amen? Amen. There's a resurrection, and we don't have to fear death. Some of your lives have been reflecting death. You need to start living again, or for the first time. And we've also learned this. The bullies, they always have expiration dates, don't they? Everyone else will catch up, won't they? They had their growth spurt a while before you, but guess what? You grew up, and they're not so big anymore, are they? We don't have to fear them because empires will fall. They always do. God's kingdom lasts forever and ever and ever. Amen, amen, amen. God's people, we got this for a time, but guess what? Time happened. And after a while, Babylon turned into Medo-Persia. And then a leopard came in, Greece. And then the Seleucid empires came in. And then Rome came in. And God's people, they lost their hope and they lost their identity. And they began thinking maybe the Messiah didn't look like Daniel. Maybe he looked like something else. Judas Maccabeus, you ever heard of him? Steps onto the scene, 167 BC. And he gets Israel to revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes V. And it's violent and it's bad. And God's people get hurt badly. They get to worship a little bit, but Rome comes in just a couple years later and punishes them again. Did the violent revolt work? Did eye for an eye, beastly mentality work for the Jews? Has it ever? Has it ever worked for us? No. But what God's people begin to do is they begin to look for a Messiah that's going to look like this. Begin to look beastly, like bullies. And when Jesus came here, it was a bit of a disappointment for his people. Isn't that sad? Today, I write blogs, and on these blogs, I've been trying to show, look, God is a God that does not come down and need to punish Jesus and murder him to be happy with us. I've been talking about this online a lot. And there's this large group, I would say the majority of Christians, we call them fundamentalists, they've stepped in, they've said, no, God is wrathful, he is angry, he needs to punish Jesus. And you'll be punished for eternity, they'll say. And as I've been saying, no, that's not God, I've been getting long, venomous emails and interesting threats. But I believe God is good, amen? Here's what I've seen, though. In our culture, we stopped looking to Jesus, the Jesus of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who says, love your neighbors and show compassion. We exchanged him for Judas, didn't we? And that is the ultimate betrayal. We exchanged Jesus for Judas. So Jesus steps onto the scene. And he says, look, that's not the way to live. Beastly empires will destroy. They'll destroy you. We talked about the cross the last couple weeks. Have you enjoyed it? I've enjoyed talking about the cross. Because here's one more, again, let me just say it in this way. The cross exposes sin and death and that stinking bully, the devil, doesn't it? It exposes them for what they are. Watch this. Romans chapter 6, verse 23. For the wages of sin is, but the gift of God is, for a while we believed that sin brought us life. Those things on the pages of your computer, you think they're bringing you life, but you found that they don't. They actually bring you addiction and pain. And you're beginning to learn that those things that you thought would bring you life, they actually bring you death. And on the cross, Jesus shows us, he exposes what sin does. What does sin do? It puts an innocent man on a cross. We murder God. Here's something else that happened on the cross that we exposed. We exposed what death really looks like. Watch this. Romans says this, for we know that since Christ was raised from the dead, I should hear an amen from that. He cannot die again. Death no longer has mastery over him. And guess what? It doesn't have mastery over us. So many of you are scared to death of death. You're scared. Well, look at Orange County. We nip, we tuck, we do all these things to try to pretend that we're not dying. And we look ridiculous. You are dying. But guess what? We don't have to fear death. Some of you show up every week because, again, you're scared. You might not get your golden ticket if you don't show up to church. I will tell you, I'll relieve you of that. You've got your golden ticket. Now start living like you have it. Amen? Here's the last thing it did for us. On the cross, we see this in Hebrews. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in our humanity so that his death might break the power of him who holds the power of death. That is the devil, that stinking deceiver. And free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Guess what happened on the cross and at the resurrection? Satan, that stinking bully, was defeated. He was exposed as a deceiver. And that power that he held over you, no more. Someone might be excited about that. Jesus takes that power back. He says, you see those keys? I'm holding them. He is a deceiver. He's been deceptive. I came to bring you life, and life more abundantly. So what do we do with this today? I'm trying to move fast. So I want to get you to Sabbath school. I know that's important. What do we do with this? We live in a culture that revolves around consumerism and violence, don't we? It revolves around this stuff. What do we do? Here's what I've seen some people do. They ignore it. They pull out their graphs and their decoder rings, and they hide out in their bunkers waiting for the end time, not realizing that it's already started. And they don't live their lives now, and they just wait it out. And they miss the beautiful experience of life now. God is calling you to live heaven now and share that with everyone else that you know. If it was really good news to you, would you be sharing it with everybody you know? You probably would. I want you to think about this too. Some people, they'll pick up the hammer and the nails, and they'll buy into the beastly empire mentality. And they'll violently oppose us. And before you know it, they've embraced it so much that they begin accusing us with hammers, nails, and it's sad. Here's what I believe God calls us to do. To stand up to resist the pull of beastly empires. By showing mercy and compassion and love to those in need. I'm going to go there today, and I'm going to say something that might make you angry. You ready? Every single week I've talked about Daniel, I've had someone come up and say this. Well, what do we do with ISIS, Pastor? What do we do with ISIS? What do we do with these violent groups that are stepping up into the picture? Well, you can't possibly tell me you just sit back and let them do this. You're right. We don't. Here's what I want to show you. I want to read you something powerful. There was this Catholic monk named Christian Decher. He lived in a monastery in Algeria. In 1993, radical Islam began to spike there. And it got so bad that people were telling him, you got to get out of here. You have to flee. He stayed, amen? Because he thought the people there were worth redeeming. He stayed there in the midst of all of this violence and chaos. And on May 24, 1996, he was beheaded by Muslim radicals. Anticipating his death, he wrote this letter to his family, his church, his community, and his enemies. And this is what it said. If it should happen one day, and it could be today, that I become a victim of the terrorism that now seems ready to encompass all foreigners living in Algeria, I would like my community, my church, and my family to remember that my life was given to God and to this country. I ask them to accept the one master of all life was not a stranger to this brutal departure. Our God was met with a cross. I ask them to pray for me, for how could I be found worthy of such an offering? I ask them to be able to associate such a death with the many other deaths that were just as violent and forgotten. My life has no more value than any other, nor any less value. In any case, it is not of innocence of childhood. I have lived long enough to know that I share in the evil which seems all around us. I should like, when the time comes, to have a clear space which would allow me to beg forgiveness of God and of my fellow human beings, and at the same time to forgive with all my heart the one who strikes me down. Obviously, my death will justify the opinion of all those who dismissed me as naive and idealistic. Let him tell us what he thinks now, they'll say. But such people should know that my death will satisfy my most burning curiosity. At last, I will be able, if God pleases, to see the children of Islam as he sees them, illuminated in the glory of Christ, sharing in the gift of God's passion and of the Spirit, whose secret joy will always be to bring forth our common humanity amongst our differences. I give thanks to God for this life, completely mine, yet completely theirs too. To God who wanted it for joy against in spite of all odds. In this thank you, which says everything about my life, I include you, my friends, past and present, and those friends who will be here at the side of my mother and father, my sisters and brothers. Thank you 1,000-fold. And to you, too, my friend of the last moment, who will not know what you are doing. Yes, for you too, I wish this thank you, this adieu, whose image is in you also, that we may meet in heaven like happy thieves. If it pleases God, our common Father, amen. What do we do in the face of violence and beastly empires? I believe we do what Daniel and Jesus did. We join a group that resists this pull, and we show compassion and love even to our enemies, because we don't fear death. Amen. We don't fear the devil because he's already been beaten. Amen. We no longer want sin to prevail in our lives. We want life, and we want life more abundantly. That is the kind of life God is calling us to. And we have found, we've overcome. We found victory. We have overcome through the blood of the Lamb. Jesus on the cross exposes these things, and we don't have to fear anymore. And someone should say amen to that. What do we do in the face of ISIS and beastly empires? I believe Daniel and Jesus show us the keys. We have overcome. Let's start acting like overcomers. Stand with me as we sing the bridge to this last song.